Welcome back. Several parliamentary committees have been conducting oversight visits across the country this week, uncovering troubling findings. They found dire conditions at various government institutions, highlighting IT failures, safety issues and governance problems. The Portfolio Committee on Public Service expressed shock at the condition of the Rustenburg Home Affairs office and called for immediate action. The state of the Master's office at the KwaZulu-Natal High Court is also concerning. Do government departments have the capacity to serve South Africans? That's the question we are asking. I'm now joined by Professor Alex van der Heever from the Wits School of Governance. Prof, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And I guess that is the main question to start there. Do governments have the capacity to service us?
Well, I think we have to ask the question, why do we see this? Because they haven't mentioned whether they visited any other places other than these three. And if everyone that they visited were in such dire circumstances, it suggests that the problem is generalized, which we already do know. Most of the municipalities are in a dire state, and many of the provincial departments, largely outside of the Western Cape, have systemic irregular expenditure. All of this indicates that there is a severe failure of governance and leadership, and that it's not changing. And we are now seeing the effects in service delivery. So we basically have to say, what do we need to do to change this? Because it is not enough to just get exasperated about it. There is a problem, and it's not going to go away by just talking about it. There is a problem at the leadership level. There is a problem at the top levels of government that are essentially tolerating or driving corruption within the state, which is resulting in these failures.
Prof, would you say that you're surprised that these MPs were shocked at the state that they find, even though you've mentioned, like we know, these aren't new revelations?
No, and the question is, if they visited 10 places, would they find 10 such circumstances? And if they visited 50, would they find 50? I think that they would probably do so. This is the problem that we're facing, is that we are not actually seeing a systemic change in the performance of the state at municipal, provincial, or national level. And they visited all three. I mean, they visited structures at those different levels of government, and they're not performing, and they're grossly underperforming. And just to point out that where you see irregular expenditure, it's a failure of that organization to follow procurement rules. And this is now happening systematically. If you go back 10 years, you will find that there is no change in the levels of irregular expenditure. And that's a proxy indicator for straight corruption, because the failure to comply with procurement rules is very often deliberate. It's not accidental. It's not a result of a capacity problem. These rules are relatively straightforward. So a failure to comply with them is very often intentional. And we're probably only, the Auditor General and the sort of general reviews only pick up a portion of these. So it is quite likely that a lot of expenditure classified as regular is actually also irregular. So it is, but we see the effect in service delivery, where we have holes in the ground, potholes, we have street lights that are not repaired. We have, a police service that is dysfunctional and not functioning. We have home affairs offices that are not functional. We see the extension to the master's offices. The court system is struggling. So all of these areas of critical areas of critical public services are not functioning. So we really do have to look very, very starkly at the people responsible, and the people responsible are at the top.
Speaking of the people at the top as well, we're not seeing that systematic change that you speak of as well. The members of parliament, what role do they play as well outside of conducting oversight visits? Because the feedback that they've given the public from those oversight visits is what the public has been saying anyway.
Well, they have two functions. One is an oversight role, and they can make things transparent. They can have hearings, and they can compel people to come and participate in those hearings and disclose what is going on. The other thing that they do is that they make laws, and they also are in a position to hold the executive to account. There's a problem in them holding the executive to account, and there's a problem with the laws that are being made, because in many cases, the problems we're seeing are a consequence of poor governance structures in place, which would actually benefit from changed legislation, which Parliament is in a position to do. So it would be nice if Parliament did more than act surprised, as I noted with the President and water services during the course of this week. Stuff that everybody is known for a considerable period of time. But all of these now require that there is a systematic change in the way the state is organized in order to change who is in top, who is running these various functions. Right at the top, and we see it what's happening in the United States. The moment you have politicians appointing people and wrecking your public services and putting in place people that are essentially part of a network of extraction, you will have a failed state. You'll have a state that can't function. So we have to remove the ability of members of the executive of government to appoint and to appoint people and appoint structures and interfere in structures within the state machinery itself. And we have to look at how we organize those governance arrangements. Everywhere where that governance structure exists, we see a failure, from PRASA to Eskom, to Transnet, to the municipalities, to the provincial governments. All national institutions that have large procurement budgets are subject to this kind of performance failure. So essentially, if you have political appointments where a perverse reason is used to select the people who run that organization, then that organization will become dysfunctional. And so we have to change how people are appointed and how they're held to account. So the corporate governance structures in many parts of government need to be changed. And we have to look very carefully at our strategic parts of the state, such as the police, South African Police Services, the NPA, SARS. All of these organizations are vulnerable to interference. And if they fail, then essentially nobody gets held to account. There are no prosecutions that happen where they should happen. There are no proper investigations that should happen. That's at the level of very serious corruption. But at the level of just straightforward performance, you have to have heads of department who know what they're doing, and we don't. We have to have CEOs of public organizations who are competent to be in those positions and are held to account for being in those positions, not politically, but for their mandate. And we don't have that. So in fact, we do need to re-legislate the governance structures of South Africa. So it would be important. Parliament has a role to play in that. Parliament can also create that legislation without the permission of the executive, and it can do so. But perhaps that would be quite useful if they started to look at the levers that they do have and started to make use of them. But I don't think that we're going to see more than people being exasperated, which is a concern. And the problem at the level of the executive is turkeys don't vote for Christmas. People are not going to change the way the government is organized when they're going to lose money. So this is a problem that we've got to fundamentally change in South Africa. If we don't change it, South Africa cannot grow and our state cannot perform.
Prof, speaking about public organizations and the importance of leadership, particularly from the top, there is a national water and sanitation endeavor that was being conducted in Midrand this week. And there it was announced that there'd be basically another SOE, the National Water Resource Infrastructure Agency, that will be set up to take a look at our water and sanitation issues across the country. Now, taking a look at how other public organizations or SOEs have been run in the country, do you think that this is a good idea to tackle water and sanitation issues?
It seems to be avoiding the issue, is that at the end of the day, a lot of your municipal services can be run properly if they were appointed properly. So an attempt to create an SOE where the governance structure is in all likelihood going to be appointed in exactly the same way as the key administrative officials in municipalities and in other organizations, nothing will change. We've just seen draft regulations on the NHI, National Health Insurance Fund, and it's political appointments from top to bottom. It replicates the structure that fails in every state-owned enterprise. So creating a new organization with the corporate governance design that has failed systematically in South Africa is no solution. We have to look at how people are nominated, appointed, and removed from these organizations, both at the level of the supervisory level and at the executive level of those organizations, and an attempt to bypass the things that are failing, to look at some other, try to solve some other problem without solving the fundamental problems is also not going to help. The municipalities are failing because there is a politically inspired pillaging of the municipalities across South Africa. And a large number of our provincial departments are subject to the same pillaging. So the question is, if government was serious about addressing that is happening, you address that directly. You look at how you change the arrangements in South Africa so that that can't happen. But there is no effort to look at that, but to create some other kind of structure that is equally susceptible to capture. So our solutions lie elsewhere, and we can't just accept superficial solutions that are just avoiding the elephant in the room. And I think that we have to accept that we are not actually getting a straight story from our top level leaders in South Africa in government.
Professor Alex van den Heever, thank you so much for your time this evening. That was, of course, Professor Alex van den Heever, who is a governance expert at the Wits School of Governance.